Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan MS Pierce's Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the, goodness me, 28th of September 2023. Just a massive thanks to people with their generous support yesterday. I was merely asking for people to write emails and they did that aplenty. Thank you so much. I am waiting for a reply back from YouTube about the situation with the channel. They did reach out to me, so fingers crossed it'll be sorted out at some point. But wow, thank you so much. You guys are amazeballs. Right, let's go and look at the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find them in the description below. 330 personnel lost, 4 tanks, and 12 APVs. 12 APVs is a fairly heavy number of losses, although the other two categories are fewer than we've seen before, have fewer losses than we've seen before. There's a lot of operational security, fog of war, lack of information coming out from certain area, Robotina area of the front line. So I don't really know what's happening there 100% yet. I'll be doing some more research over the next few hours. But I guess, it might be that there's just not a lot of footage that when you're in the middle of fighting these huge battles and taking part in this major period of counteroffensive, you're probably less likely to be submitting stuff to your superiors to try and work out how many people have actually died and just getting on with doing what you're doing, right? Doing the actual fighting. So maybe there's an element of that. I don't know. 38 artillery systems taken out yesterday. That is another massive loss for the Russians in that category. We see that consistently every day. It has to be hurting the Russians. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Depends what value system that is as to how painful that is for the Russians. 9 drones, 23 vehicles and fuel tanks, which is a fairly heavy loss. I mean, we've seen it double that on some days, but that's still a big loss for the Russians to take, in terms of their logistics capabilities. And 2 pieces of special equipment. That could be ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, could be excavators, deminers, whatever. Okay, so Andrew Perpetua, the mapper that I refer to a lot, he does his tossing up on a daily basis. I've actually got 2 to look at. Within the last 24 hours, he's produced 2, so 1 just after my video yesterday, which is this one. So on this one, ignore the T90, which I think is there. That's a mistake if there is one, or he might have taken it out of that one. So here we have Russian losses, a number of artillery pieces, number of tanks. That's going to be fairly painful for them. Surveillance, boat, IFVs, trucks, right across the spectrum of losses for the Russians. Nothing particularly stands out other than they're losing more than the Ukrainians there. And if you're pro-Ukrainian, that's what you want. Now, with the Ukrainian list, we have the first loss of Rosamax. There, as it says, 3 are abandoned there. Actually, one of those, I think, was later destroyed by the Russians. And that was worth looking at because I think I've got that piece of footage. It's worth looking at because the Russians aren't very good, as I've talked about recently, of destroying abandoned bits of equipment. They basically, ignore them quite a lot, and the Ukrainians have a greater chance of then recovering them. Anyway, IFVs being lost, that's a main component of the Ukrainian losses, and that probably signifies the sort of attack they're doing at the moment, like I keep saying. And then this is the latest sheet, so it's closer to parity. We have quite a few ISR bits of equipment, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, Brem 1 engineering vehicle for the Russians. Air defense is a Strela, that's another short-range air defense system. They've lost a number of those over the last few months. And then, generally what you'd expect. This one, it might be the T90 that's not supposed to be there. And then the list for the Ukrainians is just a kind of spectrum of losses. Nothing that really stands out, exactly what you'd expect during this kind of counter-offensive activity. IFVs, APCs, MRAPs. Right, I mentioned that a plane had gone off. Well, I didn't say how it had been destroyed, but that it had been destroyed in Mali. And this large transporter plane basically seemed to fail to take off, went over the end of the runway and exploded. I won't show that to you, but the claim here from Tim White is that 140 people died. There are various claims as to how many Wagner, how many Malians were there. But I've seen 100 Wagner, 40 Malians. But anyway, that's a bit of a loss for the Russians, obviously, and their Wagner troops there. And we'll return to Wagner a little bit later in the military aid segment in the second video. Right, this is a Rosomak that was abandoned and then later hit by the Russians. It's the first confirmed total loss of that type of vehicle. And I've been saying more recently that, you know that the Ukrainians still have quite a lot to be able to bring to bear in, say, the counteroffensive in Robotyne, because there's a bunch of equipment we haven't seen destroyed. The Rosomak being one of them, but things like Challengers, okay, we have seen one, but really there's a bunch of Challengers. We've got Abrams haven't even, got to the front line yet, so on and so forth. There are pieces of equipment that are still missing in large quantities from the front line, and that just means that they've got them ready to go, one presumes. Right, this is a bit of footage. I mean, I'm showing this because all my videos are being hammered anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But this is a grenade landing in a mine, and my goodness, these mines go up. Get out, dodge quickly, because that is going to blow. Boom. That is a huge explosion. Look at all the kind of the spalling, all the stuff coming out from there. Insane. Quite an incredible bit of footage, that. And all those mines going up. Just makes you realize that, if you're going over that in a tank, then, yeah, it doesn't matter how good your tank is. It's going up. Right, here we have the UK intelligence update. Says the Russian aerospace forces of VKS have lost approximately 90 fixed-wing aircraft in combat since February 2022. It's been flying some of its combat aircraft types for far more intensively than in peacetime. And this is really significant. Talked about this in previous videos, that it's not so much about the airframes that get destroyed in combat, but actually about the maintenance schedules and actually how long these airframes can last, given the intensive flying that's taking place. So there will be a lot of aircraft that will be unable to be used due to being overused, if you like, and that has effectively the same effect as being taken out by an anti-aircraft warfare system. So all aircraft have a projected lifespan. In flying hours, it is highly likely that this extra wartime use, Russia is eating into many of its airframes' lifespans far more quickly than the VKS planned for. The need for extra maintenance is complicated by shortage of spare parts because of increasing demand and international sanctions. The VKS maintains the ability to surge sortie rates over occupied Ukraine. However, as the war continues much longer than the Russian Ministry of Defense originally planned for, wear and tear of airframes is likely to have reduced the viability of the VKS's long-term tactical air power. And I think that's something worth bearing in mind, because as I say, it's not just about the destructive ability of the Ukrainian defenses, but just flying. Flying lots and lots will degrade your air force, and with sanctions, it's difficult to overcome that. Right, there's been another wave of Shahed drones last night, 34 out of 44. So that's a good 10 drones have got through there. And it depends where these drones attack as to what the probability of them being able to evade getting shot down. So we've seen that further to the south, near Odessa, near the Danube River, the Russians have had, over the last few months, a lot more success there. The air defenses aren't as decent in that area, or there isn't as much coverage. But if you try and do that up in Kiev, for example, you'd lose all of your Shaheds pretty much. So it does really depend. It's very variable. But I think 10 getting through will cause significant damage, and the other 34 getting shot down can also cause their own kind of damage. There were storm shadows heading towards Crimea yesterday. I don't know what the outcome is. Haven't really seen anything, but there was reports of quite a lot of missile activity going over or towards Crimea. And just a little point. This isn't so newsworthy, other than this happens pretty much nightly to different degrees, talking about Odessa and a grain export from there. When someone claims Russia cares about global food security, show them this video. Russia destroying Ukraine's grain terminals in Kherson Oblast. And it's like, yeah, we must remember that Russia has no moral leg to stand on. They are consistently committing war crimes. I mean, this is food for the world being targeted. Don't ever say that you care, Russia. Don't ever try and adopt the moral high ground, because you cannot. Right. Governor of Mykolaiv region, Vitaly Kim, reports that today there may be a record for Shahed drones being shot down. So actually, this goes back to 34 being shot down of the 44. I'm saying actually that's still a quarter of them have got through, or just less than. Vitaly Kim seems to be pretty happy that in his area, which is the Mykolaiv region. I haven't heard from Vitaly Kim for some time, actually. He used to be all over the news, saying that they're having much better success in shooting them down, which is obviously good news for Mykolaiv. That was one of those vulnerable areas earlier on in the war and throughout a lot of the war, but I wonder whether they've ramped up the air defense systems there. And we're going to talk quite a bit about air defense systems in the military aid section in the next video. Ukraine is ready to strike drone production sites in Russia, Iran and Syria, according to The Guardian. In a secret document sent to G7 countries, Ukraine suggested a way to stop the production of drones containing Western components. So not only were there complaints, we heard about this yesterday, of there being so many Western countries having components inside these drones. That was one of the big outcomes of that report, but obviously in that as well is their plans to hit drone production sites in Russia, Iran, and Syria. This is going abroad and into other countries as well. Now there have been claims that Russia is able to produce more Shahed drones indigenously now than they do import from Iran, so that might be a significant shift. I don't know where they are being produced. Obviously, Ukraine will know that. I don't know how close those kind of factories are. I know that some of their tank factories are quite far to the west or north in Russia, and that makes them difficult for the Ukrainians to hit their position there, one assumes, for exactly that kind of reason, for safety. So, yeah, these drones are definitely still a challenge for the Ukrainians. As you've seen, if the Russians can afford to send 44 of these drones overnight, and even at the rate of 75% not getting to their targets, they are causing a problem. And they seem to have a fairly consistent supply of these, other than cruise missiles. Although apparently the production of cruise missiles has been ramped up, they appear to be using more Shaheds. Right, going on to other bits and pieces. So, Russian media, severed pigs' heads have been placed at Russian propagandists' homes. Interesting. 3 Russian pro-war propagandists have stated that they have found severed pig heads on their doorsteps. Novaya Gazeta Europe, an independent Russian newspaper, reported yesterday that Timofey Sergetsev, a columnist for the Russian state-run news agency RIA Novosti, Mikhail Tereshchenko, a photographer for the state news agency TASS, and military expert Konstantin Sivkov said they'd found the heads at their homes during the week of September the 19th to 26th. My goodness. So, yeah, it's an interesting development. The Cabinet Ministers of Ukraine has appointed 3 Deputy Ministers of Defense for Rustem Umarov, namely Jigir Yuri, Anatolyevich, Natalia Fernandivna Kalmykov. Why do they have so many difficult names? And Chernogorenko Katerina Leonidivna. Yay. Something like that. The main priority for new team members is our soldiers, their lives, health and dignity. Our most important task is to ensure respect for the dignity of soldiers in all interactions with the state. So we found out recently that they'd pretty much sacked most of the deputy defense ministers and some of the kind of people who are doing a lot of these spokesperson jobs for the Ministry of Defense, and that's probably with Alexei Reznikov going and clearing out old staff members, old parts of his team, and getting a new team. But not just that, there were elements of of some people having issues, or the military having issues with a few of them staff members giving out information that they thought shouldn't have been given out at the time or wasn't true, so on and so forth. So, there are new people in place. Right, a court in Russia imposes massive fine for criticising Stalin and telling the truth about the Soviet collaboration with Nazi Germany. So this is, I think, pretty interesting. This is an element of Russia's, I don't know, lack of freedom, trying to rewrite history. It is really dangerous. So before we go on, let's remind ourselves of what George Orwell said. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. Just unpicking that a little bit. I know we hear that all the time, but for me, this means that if you control the past, if you can create a sense of narrative about what has happened in the past, and essentially make stuff up and disinform your public about who you are and where you've come from, then you can use that to inform and influence where you're going, right? And you're able to create that narrative if you control the present. So if you're the Kremlin, you control the present, right? You control everything that's going on. And so what are they doing? They are changing national curricula in Russia so that children are learning a false sense of history, a false history, and that then informs the mindset of the people that are growing up. It is, disinforming your population, and then you're allowed that allows you to manipulate them and control them into the future. This is seen with a court in Russia has convicted architect Sergei Volkov of so-called rehabilitation of Nazism on the internet and imposed a 2 million ruble fine. The charge was especially shocking as Volkov was prosecuted over his entirely accurate account of the collaboration between the USSR and Nazi Germany in the first 2 years of World War II, and his criticism of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin in connection with the siege of Leningrad. I mean, all of this is uncontroversial. Soviet Union did a deal with the Nazi Germany at the beginning of the war, which eventually, obviously, fell by the wayside. But they did do a deal. The current Russian regime under President Vladimir Putin has long used dubious legislation and increasingly politicized enforcement bodies and courts for its efforts to try to forcibly rewrite history. This trial, scare quotes, is especially worth noting since Russia is presently applying the same measures to instill an entirely false version of its war of aggression against Ukraine, both at home and on occupied Ukrainian territory. So the history that's just being made now is already being tampered with as they're presenting a false sense of reality to their population. This kind of stuff is super worrying. I mean, it's perfectly Orwellian and is hugely worrying because it's so difficult to unpack and unpick and undo. This is generational damage being done to people's psyches and sense of identity and a sense of reality. It's just really dangerous. Anyway, that's a fascinating article. I could go on, but basically, when you've got Russian courts penalizing people so heavily for being accurate, you've got a massive problem. And for all those pro-Russian voices on my threads and on the internet, is this what you're advocating? So Solid Faux Life is one of my viewers who is an American who presents anti-Ukrainian narrative and is sucking up this pro-Russian nonsense. Was this what you advocate? Is this your sense of liberty? Is this what you want out of the people, invading a sovereign nation? You approve of this kind of rewriting history, I presume, as well as all the war crimes that they're perpetrating as well. I can't make sense of it. Right, because I love to talk about Elon Musk. But this is actually really important with regard to the Ukraine war and with regard to American elections, right? So not only has the EU released a report yesterday, which is a pretty damning report of Twitter, it's not adherent. It doesn't is not part of the code of conduct, voluntary code of conduct that other social media platforms are, and it is the worst perpetrator of spreading disinformation. So some of the stats on there were really, really worrying. I mean, I know I use it, but I've got my curated sources and whatnot. But if you're just a general member of the public, it's so easy to get sucked in. And I've shown you threads, and I said, well, that's a bot, that's a troll, that's a troll, that's a troll. And we can tell that because they said that. And Twitter or X has been found to be the worst. Now, on the back of that, Elon Musk has fired the entire election integrity team at X, at Twitter, the unit created to identify threats from foreign and domestic sources manipulating our elections, says this American source. So we already know, I mean, Twitter admitted and Facebook admitted that there was Russian meddling in the 2016 election, US election, right? Presidential election, and 2020 as well. I mean, it's been admitted. I don't agree with that. No, that's not true. No, it is true. They've admitted it, right? So that's a fact. So Russia meddled in those elections, meddled in Brexit election. Now, whether it made any change to the outcome, I'm not arguing that, but they meddled, right? And they meddled. Look, they're meddling now. I show you Russian disinformation on Twitter frequently. They are meddling. They're meddling with people's idea of what's going on. But to get rid of the team that's in place for stopping that meddling in the US elections, I just don't understand what is going through this guy's head. Anyway, that's enough whinging from me about him. It happens too often. But it happens too often because he does things too often that are nuts and counterproductive for the integrity of, say, US elections, for the integrity of our access to decent knowledge and truth. Anyway, thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. You're all wonderful people. Well, most of you are wonderful people. Thank you so much. Take care. Speak soon.